Good day, men, and welcome back. Okay, let me tell you a fact. The fact is, women have rape fantasies. And the only reason it's not talked about candidly is because it makes women uncomfortable admitting it. If it makes women uncomfortable, it becomes taboo and we don't talk about it. Now, research indicates that more than half of women have fantasies in which they're forced into sex against their will. What's more, for a portion of these women, rape fantasies are their favourite or most frequent sexual fantasy. I have a link for this. It's in the low bar. It's such a common thing, yet so rarely discussed. Surprisingly, it was very briefly covered in the Metro, a British newspaper, back in 2017. Women admitted anonymously to having this fantasy, and it seems to take many forms. One fantasy was being kidnapped and held hostage, then having one of the guards forcing her into sex. Another claimed to have fantasies about thieves breaking into her house and being so attracted to her that they have sex with her against her will. In both scenarios, the women said they start out by resisting advances, then begin to enjoy the sex midway through. It's giving up the fight and giving into the desire that's the turn on, rather than the real trauma of a real-life rape. For other women, fantasies are more true to life. For some, it's not about a struggle as such, but imagining consent and control being ripped away as a major turn-on. After all, an in-depth discussion beforehand about what you're up for and what's off limits, whether it be anal sex, forced oral, or excessive force, nothing could turn women off more. There is nothing women hate more than responsibility, and rape takes away the burden of responsibility and all decision-making from the woman. She is helpless to the man. Women also indulge a great deal in victimhood, emphasized greatly by the current victim culture we have in the West. Rape enables her to play the perpetual victim. Men want to arouse and gratify their partners, but certainly there's a line in the sand. How are we to know where that line is when we can't even talk about it? The very mention of the word rape conjures up horrific implications, as it should. Real sexual assault is an horrific act, one that carries with it a penalty. Contrary to popular feminist narrative, the common man has no desire to rape a woman, yet it is women who want it. The idea of being bound, tied up and forced does seem to be part of the sexual makeup of women. But we all know the outcome if a man was to try and find that line in the sand. No, officer, it isn't what it looks like. This is what she wants. Please. Any enacting of rape fantasy in a role-play situation is a very dangerous game for a man, no matter how much trust you think there is. A woman can change her mind at any time, and then it's game over for you. I mean, false accusations against men are so commonplace nowadays, one would have to be out of their mind to test such boundaries. As many women decide after the fact, once they've sobered up, that their intimate relations were a crime committed against them. It's certainly best to leave that well alone. Need I remind any of you that we live in reality, not a fantasy? In reality, every action bears a consequence, especially for us men. In fantasy, anything is permitted and nothing is wrong. I mean, look back to 2012 at the soaring success of 50 Shades of Grey. It's difficult to overstate the success of that book. The last phenomenon we had before 50 Shades was Stieg Larsson's Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, a book which took 4 years to sell 20 million copies. 50 Shades did that in 4 months. 2 copies were sold every second during its peak. Now bear in mind, the fantasy of this book is targeted at a very mainstream set of women. When all is said and done, the book and the film rely on one fact. The same fact I mentioned at the start of the video, that women are turned on or at least interested in the notion of being sexually dominated and controlled by a man. Today, many women are so preoccupied with the concept that they go as far as to lie about or create fictitious stories of their own rape. They wear it like a badge of honour. Before I was red-pilled, many women told me they'd been raped. The funny thing is, I never asked. Of course, we never dare question the legitimacy of these stories. But what if we did? I mean, just as a thought experiment, what if we did question it? The next time a woman tells you she's been raped, maybe ask her if she underwent a medical exam, filed a police report, made an appointment with a therapist. Well, the answer would be unequivocally no, because at that point the conversation will have moved outside of a fantasy and into the reality. It is the idea of rape that fascinates women. I doubt most of them could even conceptualize the reality of such an act before it actually happened to them. Now, What's important is that we men don't get too caught up in this obvious trap and exercise common sense when it comes to women's self-indulgent daydreams. Because, after all, as the man, it is you and only you who is in danger when exploring this territory. So protect yourselves, men. Thank you very much for listening. I'm on a bit of a roll here, a weekly video. Hopefully I can keep a flow of videos weekly. I'd really like to be able to put out as much content as possible. So thank you for listening, and I bid you farewell.